Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and I'm excited that in today's video, I'm going to show you how to write our course research paper, or should I say, how the paper will write itself. In this video, let's start by looking at how to write citations in APA format. Then let's get right into how to write our course research paper. And that will include looking at Dr. Steve's method for writing a research paper and also how to work with Dr. Steve's APA template. Let's begin by looking at how to create citations in the text. APA asks us to cite works in two places, in the text of the paper and also in our reference section, also known as a bibliography. So anytime that we refer to someone else's ideas or their direct words, but even just their ideas, we have to cite them in those two places. Let's take a better look at this. To avoid plagiarism, we have to give credit in a paper anytime that we use another person's idea or their opinions or their theories or their thoughts. Anytime that we refer to statistics or charts, anything that's not common knowledge. And of course, anytime we quote or paraphrase someone else. Remember that you do not have to cite any author for something that's common knowledge or something that we would know as a fact. For example, if I'm talking about the height of the Empire State Building, well, that's pretty well known. And that's not anybody's individual, like personal creative work. Those are facts. So we don't have to worry about citing those things. But we do have to be concerned about citing someone else's ideas or thoughts, even if they're not published in an article. If you hear a lecture or you watch a video and someone is expressing ideas in there, we still want to give them credit for what they're saying as well. Creating text citations, in other words, citing works of different authors when we're writing the paper, in the body of the paper, is actually easy. There are two main ways that we do that. Number one is when we're referring to someone's thoughts, we then say, in parentheses, the author's last names, comma, and the year of publication. Now, the reason for this is meant to get the reader of your paper to go back to your reference page or your bibliography and be able to locate that work. So in this case, I'm saying Broskowski and McCann. Now notice I'm saying and, it's the ampersand key, the character, which is located by doing Shift 7 on the standard computer keyboard. And we do this before the last author, that and then we put the comma and the year of publication because maybe I'm going to cite another Broskowski and McCann article, and maybe that one was written more recently in 2018. Well, this way we can get the reader to the correct article. So notice two names, comma, year. A second way to do that is to write about them in a sentence as if you know them. You could say, according to Broskowski and McCann, so now I'm just writing as I normally would. Still, you're going to put a parenthesis and put a year of publication for the same reason, so that the reader of the paper can go back to the reference page and locate that exact article. And that's it. That's as easy as it is. Now let's focus just for a moment on a couple of special cases. APA says, for efficiency, if you're citing the same article in the same paragraph, you don't have to keep putting the names, comma, the year. If it's clear that you're taking all this information in that paragraph from the same source, then just cite it one time. If you feel that it's not clear and you have to cite it a second time in the same paragraph, then just put the names and don't put the year. And then everyone will understand, oh, it's that same article again, and you don't have to put the year. Many times in the research process, we end up citing articles that have a ton of author names. You could have maybe 15 authors on one article. Well, APA says give them all credit the first time you cite them. Now, if you're going to cite them more than once in the same paper, anywhere in the paper, then use this special Latin, et al. So I'll just put the first author's name and then et al, comma, and then once again the year. And then that, again, gives you efficiency so you don't have to keep writing the same names over and over again. If, while writing your paper, you notice that two different articles talk about the same information and you want to cite that, you can do so by starting with the first citation and putting it in parentheses, and then put a semicolon, and then continue by putting the second article as well, also in parentheses. Let's look at one other special case. When you're reading articles to prepare for your research paper, you might be very interested by an article that someone else cited in their paper, in their article, but you didn't read that particular article. Now, you could certainly go out, look it up in their reference page, and then you could cite that article. Like in this case, Rogan and Vitale. Well, I didn't read that article, but yet in the article that I did read, Broskowski and McCann, 2013, they talked about it. So I could still refer to it, but I don't want to make it look like falsify it by saying, "Oh, I read that article too." I didn't. So here's how you would do it. I refer to Rogan Vitale's study, but then I would say, as cited in the article that I've actually read. So that's a special case that many times we run into. Having looked at those particulars, now let's focus on how to write the research paper for our course, or how the paper is going to write itself. Up until now in our process, we talked about looking at titles of articles in EBSCOhost. We looked at reading maybe the abstracts so we get a better idea of what's going on in those articles, so that we can filter out articles that we really want from those that we really can't use to support our topic. Now it's time to read the articles. Now this first step in my process is read the articles carefully and take notes in your own words. We're all good note takers, so take notes. If you can read and take notes well and effectively, you can write this paper wonderfully. Now, a couple of thoughts as you're taking notes. Do not directly quote authors. In the high school world, many times English teachers will say, well, you always, when you're referring to somebody else's thoughts, you take a direct quote. In the college world, we're going to say, don't do that. Do not directly quote authors except for these two times. If an author presents an official definition, well, then you do want to put that in quote to say this is exactly what they said word for word. And otherwise, don't directly quote somebody unless the author has stated something so powerfully or in such a meaningful way that you really do want to capture every word and every nuance of what he or she has said. In that case, definitely put quotes around those words and take them directly out. Otherwise, do not directly quote authors. Take notes on what the authors have said. Take those notes in your own words. Now, one thought here. As you take notes on these articles, state everything in your own words and write it in the present. So notice in these examples, Fishbein states, Fishbein contends, according to Fishbein. It's very current. If you find yourself writing Fishbein said, well, no, that's past. So we say it as if this person is like a witness on the witness stand giving testimony in the court right now. And also, if you find yourself saying Fishbein stated and putting quotes there, well, that either better be a definition or something that's stated so powerfully that you don't want to miss every word. Otherwise, put it in your own words, also known as paraphrasing. Now, type your notes that are taken in your own words into word processing. I think we've all encountered this situation. We're writing something and we go back and say, an author talked about this somewhere. I don't remember which author it was now. Well, we can take care of that while you're typing your notes into Word. Let's create an APA citation right then and there in the notes. And we already saw how to do that. Put the author's names, last names, comma, and the year. And I'll do that for all the notes that I take. And simply, if I do one, I can then copy and paste this citation throughout all the notes taken from that particular source. By doing this, I'll never encounter that situation where I don't remember where I got this from, because you'll know, because you'll have it documented already in your notes. Now, as you type notes, realize that really you're generating ideas and you're actually writing the paper, and you just didn't realize it all along. So as you're thinking and writing notes, if you come up with any thoughts or ideas or insights, write them down too. Now, in this case, I marked my name here so I remember this came from me and not from another author. I'm not going to cite myself in my own paper because I'm the author of the paper, but that's just a reminder to me. And the idea here is any thoughts you come up with when you're in this process, write them down, because now you can use those thoughts to better write your paper and fine-tune it when you're actually in the writing stage. Now that you have all of your notes typed into word processing, now it's time to open up a second document, and that would be Dr. Steve's Word APA template. The very first step we're going to do in that template is type the headings from your outline into this template. So notice that these are all the outline points that I came up with, but the word introduction is not appearing up there. But I know the very first outline point and section heading should be introduction. But notice that this is on purpose because APA in its latest edition says don't put the word introduction. Instead, put the name of your paper here. So what is your topic? What's the title of your paper? Put that here. So there's the question that I wrote. Can distance learning improve the classroom? Really, that's my introduction. And then the other headings are the ones that I've already developed. And now, for the beauty of my method of writing a research paper, to show you how the paper will actually write itself, you now have two documents open. You have your typed notes in one document, and we just opened up the APA template, which will be your actual paper. And we just typed in as headings the outline points. Now what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the notes page and you're going to cut and paste material from the notes under the appropriate headings. So for example, here I've got advantages of distance learning. I go back to my notes page and I say, oh, well, here's one. Okay, I'll simply paste it in. And I'm going to do that with all of my headings, -2. I don't need to cite anybody or any works in the introduction or in the conclusion. So right now, I'm only working with all the other headings, but not the introduction and not the conclusion. You actually can't write those two until you've completed the paper. Then you know how to introduce it and how to conclude it. So copy and paste notes from one document to the other. By the time you finish doing that, you'll find that you have several pages of typed notes that are organized under the headings in the paper. The paper has just started writing itself. Wow, now you've got several pages of already written material and your paper is writing itself. Now what we have to do is simply craft those notes that we took, and we have to craft them into understandable paragraphs. So for example, in this section, advantages of distance learning, I need to start with a good opening sentence, and then I need to organize these notes so they actually look like paragraphs in a paper. So let's do it. I'm going to take those notes and I'm going to start with a good opening sentence. There are many advantages to using distance learning in the classroom. Then let me go on to break into my first note. One advantage is that these technologies allow blah, blah, blah. And then I'll go on. Notice I now have my citation in there too, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's going to be one whole paragraph. Then I'm going to make a new paragraph for my second note, and let me break into that. Let me segue in so people understand how this is organized. A second advantage is, and then I go on to talk about it and describe it in a little more depth. And I'll go on and say, maybe the third paragraph will say, another advantage is, if you write in this way, your work will be very much respected because it'll be highly organized. And notice how through this method we are taking away some of the sting and some of the anxiety of writing a paper. You actually already wrote it when you took good notes. So make sure you spend time reading the articles for a research paper and take good notes. As you write the paper, remember that you're trying to prove something. Like in my case, I was trying to prove that distance learning benefits students in the classroom. I have to build an argument or a case that's going to prove my point and win the court case. As you write, continually ask yourself, how can I prove my case? What evidence exists to help me prove this case? Remember that we're locating our evidence from articles because it's a research paper. Now, one other point, don't just copy information from articles. Read several articles and draw points out of those articles to formulate your personal argument. Remember that this is your paper. This is your argument that you're building. What we don't want to do is go to one article and say, oh, well, Fishbein said in his article that there are 7 advantages to distance learning, and simply Paul parrot them out. We're not looking to do that. For example, after reading several articles, and I looked at a lot of advantages to distance learning, I determined that there are 5 good advantages, 5 good reasons and ways that distance learning benefits education. I determined these 5 reasons by taking specific points out of different articles that I believe proves my case. And again, notice I did not take one article and say, well, here's what one article said, and so I'm just going to list everything out that those authors have talked about. I'm building my own argument. I'm taking bits and pieces from different articles that I've surveyed, and I'm building my own argument, my own case. And remember that the final result is going to look something like this. There are many advantages. One advantage is, and notice that I've cited an author for evidence, and then this means, and I'll talk about it. A second advantage is, and notice I've taken that advantage out of another article, and then there's even another advantage, and I've taken that from a third article. Now, at times, I may go back to the same article and pull out more than one point, and that's quite understandable. But notice that in most of the paper, meaning all of the sections, but not the introduction or the conclusion, I will have cited at least one article, because in a research paper, we're trying to cite evidence to back up our claims. So be careful that you don't come out saying, I think that distance learning is very good because I've experienced it. Well, that's not evidence. In a research paper, we need to be backing things up and supporting it with evidence. As you're citing evidence, you'll be saying things like Broskowski and Rogan argue, research suggests, Tomasic states, and notice there's an article listed for each one of these. If you find yourself saying things like, in my experience, or I have found, or it's my belief, or I have heard, well, those are opinions and your experience, but they're just claims, and they're not valid in a research paper until you can back them up with evidence. And finally, if you would like to include your own ideas, because you personally have taken a distance learning course, let's say, and you have a lot to add to this discussion, then let's add a discussion section to the paper. That'll be another heading, it's another outline point, and put that right before the conclusion, because in that section you can talk about the evidence that's already presented, and you can add your own input, and there you don't have to worry about citing anyone for that. And finally, as you are wrapping up your paper, remember that you are looking to prove something like a lawyer in a courtroom. So take a look at the different sections. Now at this point, keep in mind, we're not focusing on introduction or conclusion, because those we won't write until you write the rest of the body of the paper. If I'm trying to prove that distance learning is a good thing in the classroom, I better make sure that I have enough advantages in my advantages section, because otherwise my case will be skimpy. It's not going to have enough evidence. So if I run into this situation, simply go back and either look for more information in the articles you've already researched, or go out and locate an extra article or two. So now you can see how to write a research paper in APA formatting using Dr. Steve's method. In our next video, let's show you how to use my template in greater detail, and let me also demonstrate to you how to use this template in writing the paper. See you in the next video.